Good to have you here on this Monday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We got so much to get to here on the show, including Hawks, Game 3. Tough way to see that one go down in a number of fronts. We'll get to that coming up here in just a little bit. Braves in their weekend in Cincinnati. We'll also look at name, image, and likeness with Chris Burnett, former Georgia offensive lineman who was back there during the Todd Gurley days when he was suspended 4 games for accepting payments for autographs. Now in a couple of days, that'll be perfectly fine, according to Georgia statute. So we'll talk to Chris Burnett about that. And he was on the front line, so to speak, of a number of advocacy fronts for player rights and increased benefits and things of that nature. We'll talk to him about that coming up in just a little bit. Also, Bill Connelly, ESPN, put out a big ifs list for college football. You know, college football fans, we love ifs. Hey, we'll be fine if this happens. We'll be fine if this happens and that happens. So we'll get to that coming up in just a little bit as well. But guys, Game 3 last night in Atlanta. Hawks were in it early with the fan standpoint. Got a big lead, allowed the Bucs to crawl back, went kind of back and forth, had the big Trey ankle twist there in the ball game in the second half. And then, the Chris Middleton show happened for about 4 or 5 minutes there where he couldn't miss. And the rest is kind of history. What's your takeaway there from Game 3, BJ and Ben, about this Hawks team and how it stands, obviously with some injury concerns moving into Game 4?
Yeah, I think the big question right now is the health of Trae Young. You know, if Trae Young is not 100%, and if a guy that is so quick, so fast is dealing with an ankle injury, that's going to really limit what you can do as a team. So I think that's kind of where your mind is right now. But in terms of games 2 and 3, look, you were overwhelmed in game 2. I think we all probably thought, at least in the back of our minds, that one of those performances was somewhere coming from the Bucs, just given how talented they are and the fact that maybe it changed the dynamic of kind of their intensity level, being that they were down 0-1 in the series suddenly. And I want to say this, saying first and foremost that Trae Young's health is, I think, the leading priority from Atlanta's standpoint. But I think you got to find a way to be a little more balanced in terms of what you can do in the paint. And we said entering this series, Ben, that Milwaukee was the leading rebounding team in the postseason, and so long, so lean, so athletic. You think about Giannis, but you also think about Lopez, you think about Tucker. Well, in games 2 and 3, Milwaukee out-rebounded Atlanta 97-69, and they had a plus 15 rebounding margin yesterday. And I think that was part of the reason that the game got away from you late. And then you look at points in the paint over the last 2 games. So games 2 and 3 in the series, Milwaukee has outscored Atlanta 118-64. And I think you understand that that's the strength of Milwaukee's team, right? Like, you're not going to win every minute down on the block against the Bucs, but I think you got to be a little more productive, and the Hawks were great in the paint in game 1, actually out-rebounded Milwaukee, which almost nobody's done this season. And you saw just almost all-time great rebounding efforts from Clint Capella and John Collins. I think you got to kind of try to get back to that some here in game 4. Games 2 and 3, Milwaukee was really effective in the paint. And that's what they do, Ben. That's who they are. And you got to have Trae be healthy first and foremost. But if he is, I think Atlanta's got to find a way to try to be a little more active, albeit against just a dynamic post team in the paint in game 4.
BJ, something I talked about before this series started, I said if you can't find a way to neutralize Middleton, it's going to be very, very tough. I know that Drew Holiday is an all-star as well, but one person can cancel out the next. I never ever really worry about Giannis because I know that Trae Young can match Giannis's production as far as numbers-wise. When you look at the fact that Trae is going to give you 30, at least Giannis is going to give you 30. Yesterday, Chris Middleton went for 38. And I think the second leading scorer for the Hawks is Gallinari. You're not going to win like that. And Trae got away from what Trae does. Bigger than what Trae does offensively, what he helps his teammates do. If Trae is not averaging double-digit assists, let's face it, Atlanta don't have a bunch of guys. They don't have a bunch of one-on-one players that can create their own shot. They got guys that play well within the scheme, be able to, pick and rolls, moving around, moving without the basketball. That's not what I saw yesterday. I was fearing that Chris Middleton was going to have a go-off game. Well, that was last night. And when he's on, you can't. I mean, he has a touch like Klay Thompson when he's on. I mean, you already know what's good when he let it go. I just think for me, Trey's health, BJ, I do agree. If Trey Young is not healthy, because he is the heart and soul of the Atlanta Hawks. Now, I know it was a freak injury when you look at the fact that he, twisted his ankle, but, sprained ankles are rough to deal with in any sport, especially with a guy who moves around the basketball and utilize his speed and quickness like Trae Young does. But it's a tale of two games. I mean, I know that obviously we weren't on the air when they played game 2. That game was over at halftime. That game was over. You spent the whole time trying to come back in the second half. And Kevin, something you mentioned, Atlanta be playing the Bucks extremely well in game 2. They was playing them extremely well, but when it got out of hand, they just couldn't get it. They just couldn't get the momentum back. I know that, once again, I know that the narrative is swinging back into the national, the national press's way, the national media's way. Well, okay, now that the Bucks are looking like the Bucks, I don't think that Atlanta is outmatched. I think that Atlanta can play with the Bucks. But if you don't have a second scorer, BJ and Kevin, that can match what Chris Middleton does, I'm not saying they got to go for 38, but they can't give you 18. They can't give you 20. They got to be, 25, maybe like 10. And BJ, something you mentioned, whenever the law officers of Collins and Capella are not on the boards, it's gonna be rough because Lopez is not the best offensively, but you can't coach 7 feet tall. You can't coach a guy who's a rim stopper. I mean, and a guy that can definitely create shots for Giannis. And obviously, for Middleton. But for me, it was disappointing yesterday. Obviously, I ain't like when Trae went to the locker room. That's not something I want to see because now you're dealing with a wounded Trae Young, and you know they're going to go back to the Knicks philosophy of let's just beat him up. Now we're really going to just beat him up, put big bodies on him. But yeah, yesterday was disappointing. But I do think Nate McMillan got hopefully got a game plan to bounce back game 4 because game 2 you put in the rear view. But yeah, Chris Middleton, I mean, I think he scored 20 in the 4th. And I think all of the Hawks team scored 17. That's not going to be a winning recipe.
Yeah, I think that it was back and forth there in the 4th, and then Chris Middleton got hot. It kind of got away from him pretty quick. I think, to me, the concern is Trae Young moving into game 4. BJ, if he can't be 100%, I don't know who you have that can pick up that slack. Obviously, you have some guys kind of gutting it out. And Ben, I know you said, look, if you're out there in the playoffs, it is what it is. But obviously, I think you can look at it and say if you get 70% Trae Young, that's better than a lot of players, but it's not what you need to win in the postseason, BJ. I mean, how do you view just where the Hawks are? I know a lot of people are saying Bogdanovich probably trying to gut it out here in the playoffs, but how do you view where this Hawks team stands right now? And if you do have some legit injury concerns?
Yeah, I think there's some uncertainty given where Trae Young is potentially health-wise. And you mentioned Bogdanovich. I agree. There have been reports out there that he's been dealing with an injury for quite some time. It's been showing a lot of toughness going out there playing through it. But he was 3 of 16 last night. And, Ben, you talk about that, at least in theory, maybe Trae Young and Giannis, their production kind of cancels each other out in some respects. Well, like you said, you had Middleton go for close to 40. Well, to Kevin's question, who's going to be that number 2 for Atlanta? And I think that's a good question moving forward. I think it's fair. At times it's been John Collins. At times it's been Gallinari. At times it's been Capella even. At times it's certainly been Bogdanovich, but you don't know about Bogdanovich's health. You don't know about Trae's health right now. But I will say this, to go back to something you said, Ben, I don't think the series is over. Sometimes we get so caught up in momentum. Let's kind of reconfigure this series. Let's say Milwaukee won the first 2 games back in Milwaukee and Atlanta would have won last night. Well, I think a lot of people will have said, oh, it's chalk. The Bucks won at home too. Now Atlanta's won at home. And I think people would be looking at game 4 as the pivotal game. And there wouldn't be this kind of sense of impending doom around the Hawks. You'd look at it as, well, the Bucks won at home and the Hawks won at home. So I think Atlanta is still very much in this series. Obviously, tomorrow night is going to be key. It goes without saying that Bogdanovich, Young, you're already talking about a roster without DeAndre Hunter, of course. But if Trae Young is not 100%, you're in a really tough spot. And I like the balance. Lou Williams can score, Gallinari can score, but your health in the backcourt is going to be paramount, and a lot depends on Trae Young and what he's able to do. But again, think of it like this: if Milwaukee would have won the first 2 and Atlanta would have won last night, we'd still be 2-1 in favor of the Bucks, but I think people would be a lot more optimistic. So Atlanta's still got game 4 at home. If everybody's healthy or at least close enough to healthy, I think they still have a good chance to win that game.
Yeah, I don't think the series is over either. But the thing that scares me the most about Atlanta, BJ, you mentioned a lot of different guys. Yes, Bogdanovich can score, and Lou Williams can score, and Clint Capella can score, and Collins can score. But those guys you got to be able to do it when it's time. The thing about Chris Middleton, I mean, he hadn't been playing the best, but when he turned it on, it's like in his mind, he said, all right, fellas, I got y'all today. And I think for me, who is that go-to? You know what you're going to get out of Trae. It's almost like if Trae doesn't have a good game, you expect him to show up in the assist department, or getting fouled and late in the game to kind of get to the free throw line. I mean, if Collins ain't scoring, who's going to score? If Lou ain't scoring, if Bogdanovich ain't scoring, if Clint Capella ain't scoring, if Gallinari ain't scoring, and to me, that's the thing. You're not going to become something in the playoffs you weren't in the regular season. It's just not going to happen. Can a guy have a moment? Yes. But Chris Middleton went off last night. It's to the point where I'm like, it's like on I know you guys saw the episode of the Dave Chappelle show when they played Prince. The Prince was like good. Like he just as soon as he let it go, it's good. I mean, it was beautiful to watch, but hate the fact that it happened to my Hawks. I just think that yes, BJ, they're gonna have to rebound, and unfortunately, Trae Young is gonna have to test his pain threshold because he's gonna have to battle through it.
Well, again, I think it's utmost important. You go down 3-1, BJ. It's obviously a way different story at that point for Atlanta, with a potentially hobbled roster with some key pieces that may not be at 100%. We got much more to get to on that as we go out throughout the show. We'll hear from Chris Burnett, former Georgia offensive lineman, coming up in about 20 minutes. Really good perspective, I think, upcoming from him as a guy who was out there back far as 2014, talking about potential name, image, likeness rights, things of that nature for student athletes. We'll talk to him about how he feels now, 2021, just a couple of days away here in the state of Georgia from that being a reality at the end of the day. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live at ESPNCoastal.com. Also catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you're with us. Chris Burnett going to join us coming up in about 12 minutes here on 3 and Out. We'll talk name, image, likeness. He is a guy that as far back as 2014 was sounding off about Todd Gurley getting suspended for 4 games for accepting payments for autographs while at the University of Georgia. Now here we are 3 days away from name, image, likeness being just another thing in college football. At least in Georgia, in a couple of days. So he'll join us coming up in just a little bit and talk about that and all the efforts and what he thought in 2014 versus what he sees coming now in 2021. So we'll get to him coming up in just a little bit. But Bill Connelly, ESPN, obviously as fans, BJ and Ben, we love to play the what if game. Well, what if this happens? Then we're good. What if this happens on our team? Then we're good. Bill Connelly put those ifs out. If this happens and this happens, we'll be good. What stands between certain college football teams and playing for that national title? For example, Alabama, he said, if Bryce Young is ready, they're going to be good. If another wide receiver steps up, that compounds it for Alabama. How do you feel about some of those out there in college football when it comes to what if this happens, a national title could be next?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alabama's really good. On paper, they're right there. No surprise. Look, some uncertainty with Bryce Young. I think this is a guy who looked really good in the spring game. Reports have been great. I think he's going to be really productive, really proficient. I understand the question about the wide receiver spot outside of John Mechie, and I think we all agree John Mechie is going to have an All-American season. A name to keep an eye on there is Jameson Williams from Ohio State. The transfer to Alabama was the 3rd leading receiver for the Buckeyes a year ago. I think he could be a player to watch. Maybe, and this is relative, guys, but maybe a question about the offensive line. When you look at last year, you had Alex Leatherwood, All-American award winner. He's gone. You had Landon Dickerson, All-American award winner. He's gone. You had Deontay Brown at guard, obviously drafted. He's gone. So, yeah, I mean, I think Bill brings up some good points. I would add in, if you're looking for questions, you really got to look when you're talking about Alabama, maybe the offensive line, a relative question or two there.
If Bryce Young is going to be about as good as you can get, and you know he's going to have a running game. I mean, BJ, the thing is, we compare Alabama to the Alabamas of the past. It's not who they're going to be going up against, because if Alabama has a problem, that's still going to be a huge problem for who they're standing in front of. I think Bryce Young is going to be as good as advertised. I stay away from these spring games, right? But they was like, oh my God, did you see this throw? I know that John Mechie is one of the most, disrespected receivers coming back in college football, but I just think that for me, Alabama's might not have the offensive line they had in the past, but they still going to be one of the top 10 in the country. So I don't see it being a problem. And the one thing that Bill is focusing on when it comes to these what else, it's all on the offense, right? Well, you got to be able to score against this Alabama defense too. Have you seen who they got coming back? So yeah, I think that Bryce Young is going to be fine. I think that John Mechie, I do want to see another receiver. I think you said the receiver coming over from Ohio State transferred into Alabama. But, they got another Devonta Smith. If he's half as good as the other one, he'll be just fine too. So I don't see Alabama having as big. But I do like the what-if game, because this is the kind of – Bill Connelly does this stuff for the teams that Alabama players. See, they're not that good. Yeah, okay. Keep on letting Bill Connelly fool you if you want to. They don't never look that good until you got to step out there in front of them. But, yeah, I think Bryce Young will be just fine. John Mechie will be just fine. And they'll find a running back to hand the ball off to, Kevin. You know how slouched the running backs be at Alabama. Yeah,
I know. They're just – you never know. But it sounds to me like you guys are both – the if on Bryce Young is not even a question. Like, it's not going to be if Bryce Young was ready. You guys seem to be pretty solid. Like, no, it's fine. Like, that's not even an if. Like, he's going to play well, and he's going to have a great season.
Yeah, I have no concerns with Bryce Young. I thought there was a good chance he was going to play and be the starter last season, and obviously Mac Jones had a historic run. But, Bryce Young played at one of the top prep programs in the country. He's been groomed for this position, 5-star, had a great offseason, was really productive in the spring game. I have no concerns about Bryce Young.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about it, too, when it comes to Bryce Young, he's not trying to fill the shoes of Mac Jones. Just like Mac Jones didn't fill the shoes of Tua didn't fill the shoes of Jalen Hurts. They carved their own legacy. So now, Bryce Young, you next in the driver's seat. You got the Ferrari. It's crimson, whatever color that is. and don't wreck it. Every last guy before you got it, Kevin, they seem to not wreck it, even though Tua did his best to wreck it with his dislocated, with his dislocated hip or what may have you. But no, Bryce Young will be just fine. I mean, he's like, how do you know which one Bryce Young? He's the only one in Alabama driving a Ferrari. He'll be easy to spot when you see him.
Yeah, I think, and then you move on to a team like Clemson. I think there are a good many what ifs. If DJ Uiagalelei and the wide receivers are ready, I think they're going to be very, very good. And you say, well, why wouldn't they be? I mean, we saw one game, right? And it was a very, very good one, BJ. But as we know in the quarterback game, anybody can go out there and play one tremendous game. It's the how do you do it week to week to week. I think kind of we'll get to this later, but kind of the thing about the if question of if JT Daniels plays well. We saw 4 games from JT Daniels with Georgia. 2 of them were pretty good, and 2 of them were kind of I think that's a good question there for Clemson to start off with is if DJ Uiagalelei and the wide receivers are ready for prime time to step into that role.
Yeah, I mean, I'll disagree a little bit here. I don't have any questions about DJ Uiagalelei at all, and I'll kind of take a little bit of an opposite approach where it was one game. I understand that, but you also have to look at it like this: it was one game against a top 5 team on the road in a national showcase game, and it didn't faze DJ at all. He was absolutely elite. He was spectacular. And his passer rating from that one game against a top 5 team was 164.7. Now, I understand this is extrapolating out a little bit, but if you were to use his season passer rating as his rating from that one start, he would have been 13th in the country last year. And think about this company. Number 8 last year in passer rating was Sam Howell. Number 9 was Matt Corral. Number 10 was Justin Fields. Number 11 was Spencer Rattler. Number 12 was Trevor Lawrence. And if you use the number from DJ's game against Notre Dame, he would have been number 13. So for me, the fact that he stepped onto the biggest stage in college football just about and had one of the best single game performances we saw all of last season gives me extreme confidence that he is going to be elite. And I know there, are some questions in terms of the former 5-star guys kind of living up to that potential on the perimeter, but I think Clemson is as good as anybody in the country at wide receiver. Looks like Justin Ross is going to be back. I know we're all rooting for him. I have no questions about Clemson in terms of their roster. My question is basically, do you get bored? I mean, Ben, you've talked about that before, and I'm not saying that in week 1. Now, I understand you played Georgia in week 1, but after that Georgia game, you're going to be at least a 14-17, maybe 20-point favorite in every single game the rest of the way out. Do you have one of those games where your focus maybe isn't there just subconsciously, or you kind of get worn down by just the length of the season? In terms of the roster, I have no questions with Clemson.
Yeah, man, DJU. Yeah, his debut. I mean, we're talking about. I know we're gonna get to JT Daniels later, but I don't think you had a better debut than DJU last year. I think when you look, and then it's who he did it against. Not like it was against slouch. It was against Notre Dame, BJ, and they did not lose the game because of DJU. The defense forgot to show up that day. But BJ, you mentioned John Ross. I mean, obviously he has a neck injury, which is a little bit different, not a lower extremity, which is going to be very, very. They're going to have to be watching that. But doesn't Clemson just breed receivers? Didn't they just go out there and find guys? Nobody. I don't think nobody who DJU threw to last year is going to be back this year. But Clemson, different year, same result. DJU, he's built for prime time.
Yeah, we'll take a look at some of those if questions for Georgia as it pertains to them getting there to the national championship scene as well. We'll come back, though. Speaking of Georgia, we'll talk to Chris Burnett, former Georgia offensive lineman. He was kind of way back when advocating for name, image, likeness rights as well. He'll join us next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop here with you all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Of course, coming up in just a couple of days, name, image, likeness will be in effect here in the state of Georgia for collegiate athletes to go out and profit on their name, their image, and their likeness. Our next guest played ball at the University of Georgia, two-time SEC East champion, 3-year starter there on the offensive line at the University of Georgia, and way back in the day was at the forefront of this. Chris Burnett joins us here on 3 and Out. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kevin. Ben, thank y'all for having me on.
Hey, we appreciate you coming on. And I say way back when, 2014, obviously Todd Gurley gets a 4-game suspension for doing what in 3 days will be perfectly fine, which is taking money for autographs. And you tweeted out then that, hey, a college athlete who can't profit off your own name, the NCAA didn't give him his talent or his name. And here we are 7 years later, and it's about to be a reality. Talk about just being in that time and kind of to see where we're at now.
Yeah, it kind of feels like we're in the twilight zone, if I'm to be totally honest with you, but in a very good way. I'm very grateful just to kind of see how things have progressed. My last season in college was 2013, and during that time I had a paid internship with the NCPA and was in the midst of some controversy around, just kind of allowing players to profit off of their name. And I just had experienced and seen it firsthand, AJ Green in 2010, and then seeing it with, a former teammate in Todd Gurley and his circumstance. It was frustrating because I'm actually one of the few guys who doesn't want to see college football become a semi-pro league, where they're paying players and it's, to the highest bidder and everyone is getting paid in that way. But I do believe it's anti-American for players not to be able to profit off of their own name, benefit, and talent in some form or fashion, whether it be for marketing deals or doing a YouTube channel or something like that. So it's exciting to see that within a few days they'll finally have that opportunity. And
Chris, when you say that, you don't want to see it come semi-pro. You don't want to see it become going to the highest bidder. And you've got to see it from both rounds. When you're in that seat, it's hard to see the full picture. Then you take a step away and you say, oh, is it because you saw what it could potentially become and saying, dude, I want it to happen, but is it because at the same time, where social media is now compared to when you was in school and there was no social media when I was in school. But what do you fear the most about when you say it is anti-American and I want the best for the players, but I don't want this thing to become to, really 45, 55, 75 sold to the man with the brain.
Yeah. It's not that I'm so much against it. It's more so that I believe there's a better way. I think there's a better solution. The NCAA for the longest has claimed that it's about being a student first and an athlete second. And I believe that the way to empower players to utilize their talents and gifts on the field, but also to get their education, is to incentivize education. And so for me, I would love to see them put together a trust, or each individual school to put together a trust to where when there's revenue that's generated, instead of them, just funneling that back into the program or giving it to the next coach or paying the coaches who's already left and just buying out that contract, to put it in a trust and allow any player who graduates to get access to, $25, $50, $100, $200,000 that they may have generated in revenue during their time in college. And then they can use that as a fresh start, whether they make it to the NFL or NBA or any professional sports league or not. And I just feel like that would allow players to truly benefit off of it, but also make NCAA and those programs underneath it to put the money where their mouth is. If it's really about education and it's really about, these guys being set up the way that they should when it comes to learning and putting emphasis on schooling, then they should do that.
Chris, you talked about your time with the National College Players Association. I guess for starters, tell folks what that is.
Yeah.
Who may not know what that is, and kind of what your involvement with them was all about, and kind of what you took from that. I guess that experience.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Kevin. I think when I was in college, the NCPA was considered a de facto unofficial players association for college athletics, specifically for basketball and football. So those revenue generating sports. And Ramogi Huma, he was a former college football player. I believe he played at UCLA. He was a linebacker. He started the NCPA, and he was all around the controversy with the Ed O'Bannon case. And, you know, basically the whole deal that killed NCAA football. I don't know if y'all loved NCAA football like I did. Yeah, so I was depressed. I was so upset about it, but I was grateful because I was like, man, at least I got to be in the last one, at least for now. But it looks like we're coming back. And during that time with the NCPA, we were basically just trying to be the legs and feet of Ramogi, as well as really all players across the country. We were getting petitions signed to, you know, increase medical benefits for players after they're done. We were trying to get petitions signed to adjust the way practices were handled or managed, or holding schools accountable to the 20-hour rule on a weekly basis, things like that. And it was really just trying to provide awareness. And as soon as I was done with college, and, you know, the NCPA has kind of progressed on from what it was when I was there. But it was really just a bunch of guys from multiple schools across the country, you know, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Georgia, a few UCLA, et cetera, just trying to have our voices be heard. And it's pretty incredible to see where some of those small grassroots work has kind of led to where we are now.
Chris, how important is having a collective voice and working together in unity, working together with other student athletes, other former student athletes, to try to get this message out and change perspectives?
Yeah, I think it's huge, BJ. That's a great point, because I think that's what allowed us to actually make some form of noise and change, was the fact that it wasn't just Georgia having a conversation. It wasn't just Florida having a conversation. There were multiple schools, and it became a national conversation. And I love the fact that a lot of, you know, people like yourselves who are in the news media regarding sports kind of took that baton and made it a point to say, hey, these guys are kind of being taken advantage of in one sense or another. And I was really grateful to see that as things evolved and progressed. And also, I think for me, if you're not on one accord and you're not in like a united front, it's very easy to divide people and cause discord and never get any progress done in the first place. Because to be completely honest, my experience at the University of Georgia was incredible. They really took care of us. I think that they put an emphasis on education and allowing guys to not just be milked for their talent, but actually set them up for progress for the future. And you know, I credit that to Mark Richt, the head coach. I credit that to Greg McGarity, who was the AD, Carla Williams, who was an associate AD, who's now at Virginia. Like, they were the reasons why we had an environment that put an emphasis on that. But just because my environment and situation was good, my friends who played, you know, at another school across the country or in the SEC as well, didn't have that same experience. And, you know, we just wanted it to be as equal and as equitable as possible.
I mean, Chris, something me and BJ and even Kevin, you know, we talk about a lot is, you know, the least among us mentality. I went to the University of Florida, you went to the University of Georgia, so our experience is going to be very, very similar, even though you played in the, you know, in the mid 2000s and I played in the early 2000s, right? Because the environment is the same. I always believe in, the only way you're going to control the room is by being in the room, right? You got to be in there.
That's right.
You was at the NCPA. You understand what's coming. If you're in college right now, the NCPA, you probably don't know about it. You trying to beat Clemson the first game of the year. How much do former players gonna have to be a part of this progress, even if we don't benefit anything besides protecting the current player?
Ben, you hit the nail on the head, man. It has to be a lot of our passion to go alongside those players who are currently involved in it. When I was involved with the NCPA, I was a senior. I was technically already graduated. So it was almost like I didn't have to do any of that stuff because I wasn't going to see the fruits of that labor. And I think it takes a little bit of that unselfishness, like you were saying, Ben, for us to kind of take that baton and find ways to use our platform, our education, our knowledge to the benefit of guys who may or may not know better for themselves. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening right now. You're getting more and more, athletes and former players and people in the media who had experiences sharing those stories and saying, this is how it was, and this is how I hope it will become in the futures.
Chris Burnett joining us here, former Georgia offensive lineman, 3-year starter there for the Dogs, 2-time SEC East champion. And again, as we said, Chris, this week in the state of Georgia, name, image, likeness becomes a thing. Is that something that when people hear about it, they think, oh, it's going to be, we talked about this earlier, but a free-for-all? Or how many different areas of athletics, and I don't just mean football, but, other athletes and other sports at universities you think are going to ultimately, reap some pretty good benefits of finally being able to do this?
I think a lot of guys will. And I would hope that as it kind of expands, that more and more of these athletes will have that opportunity as well, where it's not just limited to football and basketball, the major revenue generating sports, but that the women who are playing and, doing gymnastics or, softball, equestrian, etc., can just benefit and find extra ways to make ends meet when they're in college, and also not just, have money to splurge, but potentially allow them to set themselves into a better position when their sport is done. Because all of us here know, you're one injury away from your opportunity being done, or you're one circumstance away from your scholarship not being renewed the following year. So if you have that opportunity, I think it's best for people to fully be able to realize and maximize it. And that's not saying that it was a hard life at all. In the late 2000s, playing college football, it was a beautiful gift. It was a blessing from God to even have that opportunity. And I would never complain about it. I have a degree from an incredible school and met some incredible people and great experiences. But I do believe that if some of these rules and the NIL was in place back in 2009, I would probably have a little bit more money in my bank account. And I wouldn't be mad at that at all.
When you think about amateurism in college athletics, we're seeing all this change right now, but for the past generation, there wasn't a ton of change in terms of forward momentum for kind of the evolution of amateurism, and everything else around college athletics in terms of media coverage and money changed. In your mind, kind of what's next? What should amateurism mean for the student athlete?
That's a great question. I don't know if I had an answer to that because it's such a good question, but I would hope that as things evolve, like you said, that it's actually keeping pace with how, the media dollars and the exposure continues to grow. Like you said, it was a major lag. It was honestly probably about a 20 to 30 year lag behind the money that was being generated towards what players were actually benefiting on. So as you saw the TV dollars going up and the coaches' salaries going up and the facilities becoming state of the art, beyond state of the art, you just saw more and more players continuing to kind of struggle on a daily basis. So for me, I feel like amateurism, I would hope I would hope it just doesn't become a feeder to the pro sports, because I do think you lose some of the magic that you get, within college athletics. But if that's what it becomes, that's what it becomes. And, I'm all for players having that ability to kind of self-actualize and find a way to hopefully benefit and provide for their families in the future.
Chris Burnett joining us here on 3 and Out. And Chris, before we let you go, we do have to ask you about 2021, man. I know the Dogs have high expectations. What do you see? Obviously Clemson out of the gate, but what do you see from UGA here 2021?
Yeah, I'm excited about 2021. I feel like I've had the same outlook since about 2007 when I was a recruit, and that it's championship or bust. I feel like there's always the talent in Athens, but not necessarily the execution at all times, myself included. I kind of blame myself in 2012 when we lost to Bama. But I feel like we are always knocking on the door. And I would hope that this year be the year when we don't just knock on the door, we knock it down and walk through that door and finally win a championship for the first time since 1980. I think with the talent that we have, JT Daniels, we have our quarterback, we have a stable of running backs that's better than anybody in the country, which is nothing new. Like, I feel like it's been that way since about 2011. And And also, we have a solid stable of guys in the trenches. You know, our defensive line, we didn't get as much pressure as I would have liked last season, but I think that's going to change. And on the O-line, even though we lost guys in the league, I think we have a solid stable of smart, incredibly talented, and way bigger guys than I ever was playing on the line. So I'm excited to see where the Bulldogs go this season. And honestly, if we're not in Atlanta playing in the SEC championship game, it's a failure. But I don't expect anything less than that. And I know Kirby expects the same.
Chris Burnett joining us. Chris, really appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Chris Burnett, our guest here on 3 and Out, 3-year starter of the offensive line there for the Georgia Bulldogs. And we've got more to come all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back. It's 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you are with us all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. Glad you are with us. Again, great chatting with Chris Burnett, BJ, and Ben. They're in the last segment about, again, his kind of way back experiences, even as far back in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 portion of looking ahead to name, image, likeness, and what's coming here just in a couple of days. And again, we kind of joked about it pre-show. Todd Gurley missed 4 games in 2014. 4 games. So what? A third of the season he missed for something that in 3 days will be perfectly fine.
Yeah, and look, this has been a long time coming, and I think there have been a lot of things that have led us to where we are now moving forward. And we've talked about this for a couple of weeks, and yes, great perspective there from Chris. But I think moving forward, we still have some questions that are hard to answer. I mean, even chatting with Dan Murphy, Ross Dellinger, guys like Chris, you know, we all are kind of waiting to see sort of what the end result of this is going to be or how we're going to get to that point. So yes, it's a different world starting in a couple of days. And like we've talked about with the playoff and everything else, it's kind of come in a rush, at least it feels like. So to me, I think we're moving in the right direction, but still more questions than answers when you look at the future.
I feel better when I hear guys like Chris. Only problem is, I mean, I don't hear enough of guys like Chris making sure that we're doing our part as former players. And Chris said something that I think is very, very relevant. He said about being unselfish and thinking that, listen, you're not going to reap you're not going to reap the benefits from the people you're trying to, stand in the gap for. So for me, it's about me figuring out how I can inject my influence to try to make sure these young people know, both male and female, that somebody out there looking out for their best interests.
Certainly, we appreciate Chris joining us here. We'll come back, take 3 right around the corner. We'll look at Georgia's what-if questions heading into the 2021 season. And, of course, something happened over the weekend that got a lot of people talking around the world of college athletics. We'll get that hour number 2. It's 3 and Out. Hour 2 on this Monday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you are with us. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. We'll talk some college football what ifs with Bill Connolly's list. He put out there, ESPN.com. We'll look at Georgia specifically coming up here in about 20 minutes. Also a big NCAA event that took place over the weekend that had a lot of people riled up. We'll talk about that coming up in about 30 minutes as well. But first, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take 1 as we are getting closer towards training camps getting started there in July towards the preseason. Who is a free agent you would like to see the Atlanta Falcons target?
For me, it's Richard Sherman. I think you're talking about a just clear Hall of Famer, one of the best corners in NFL history, and I think a guy that can still play some really good football. And when you look at Atlanta's roster, there are questions at a number of different spots, but I think we would all agree, at least on paper, cornerback is probably right there at the top of the list. And I know you have some young guys that are developing, but if you could get Richard Sherman in there, that's a guy that you can count on. That's a veteran. That's a guy that plays at a high level still, and I think he could also kind of help teach the trade. What it takes to be an elite cornerback. Those guys could learn from him. I think he would be a great locker room presence in addition to being a really good player on the field. So you need help defensively. You need help at corner. I'm going to ignore that comment about Ben Schrute being signed at tight end and me as a backup quarterback. I'm going to ignore that. Ben, yours is probably a little more realistic, but I'll say Richard Sherman for me would be a great addition.
For me, I'm looking at the offensive side of the football. As long as I've been an Atlanta Falcons fan and watched the Atlanta Falcons, I've never seen the defense be at the forefront. BJ, while I like Richard Sherman, he's going to be asked to go out there and cover number 1 receivers in their early 20s, and I think he's in his early 30s with a lot of wear and tear on those legs. To me, I think you address 2 positions. I think Alshon Jeffrey at the receiver position and Le'Veon Bell at the running back position. Le'Veon Bell needs to get back into the good graces of the National Football League with the comments that he made about Andy Reid. That is not going to help anybody boost their resume, even if you are Le'Veon Bell. And I do think Le'Veon Bell, when he has been a feature back, even though that's been a while now, he has shown to be able to do it in the passing game, which running back's going to have to do now, BJ, as well as running between the tackles. Now, his running style, I don't know, is conducive to what Arthur Smith wants to do, but for me, I think he'll be a good fit. Alshon Jeffrey, haven't seen him in a while. Like, I forgot that Alshon Jeffrey was in the National Football League. Obviously, his best years are behind him, but I still think he got some good quality left in those tires. So for me, Alshon Jeffrey and Le'Veon Bell, 1, because they both got veteran experience, 2, they got championship experience, both coming from big time.
I think Ben may have froze up on us there for a minute. Moving along, take 2. Wimbledon starts today. What sporting event do you always watch, even if you never watch that sport outside of that one event?
Yeah, I think swimming or track, you think about those sports, especially in the Olympics. And part of what's so amazing about those sports is in the Olympics, you're talking about, 0.0001, second determining who wins. And it's like you're watching it and you're getting so caught up and you're looking around going, I can't even tell. We got to go to the clock and then we have to get the confirmed time. And it's like it's so close and it's so, hard to distinguish between first, second, third, fourth that I think there's just an inherent level of excitement there. I like the relays. The relays are very fun to watch and are very compelling. Can somebody come from behind? So I would say for me, when I think about sports, in the Olympics that maybe I don't follow throughout the year, track and swimming would be sports that immediately stand out to me. Just amazed at the athleticism, the speed, and then the difference, again, between winning and losing, just such a slim margin. It's amazing.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's probably Kentucky Derby. And I guess you could say the Triple Crown races. I usually try to make a point to watch those 3, and I'm not trying to hunt around for the horse racing channel the rest of the year. Just not doing it, but I will watch those 3 because for 2 minutes, it can be a whole lot of fun on a Saturday afternoon in May to watch those events take place. But there's a couple of those I could see for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of people that tell me, hey, man, I don't like golf, but I will watch the Masters. Indy 500. I don't watch racing, but I will watch the Indy 500.
What about hockey? You don't watch the Stanley Cup?
Do you know people that don't really watch hockey that are just jumping in just for the Stanley Cup Finals? I just don't know a lot of people that say that. Like, hey, I don't really watch hockey. I'm not really a fan, but I'll
say
watch
that to Cody.
finals.
Say that to Cody. You just walk back in.
Well, Cody watches regular season hockey. That's not a question. That doesn't fall in the purview of this question. You have to never pay attention to it until an event happens.
No, it's 100% true. If you don't watch hockey, you're not even watching.
Yeah, if you don't watch regular season hockey, you're not going to just say, "Oh, I think I'll watch the finals."
Yeah, I've never met anybody. There's people who do that with the NBA and everything like that, but I've never met anybody who's like, "Oh yeah, I watch hockey during the finals." I always get people who say, "Hockey sucks. Why do you watch hockey?" I'm like, "Yo, okay, cool." You know what I mean? But it's the same with the World Cup. A lot of people don't like soccer, but they watch the World Cup to watch the USA.
That's true. Yeah, hockey's not that way, though. Nobody says, I don't watch the regular season, but I'll tune in for Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Nobody's doing that.
Who's in the Stanley Cup Finals, Kevin?
Exactly. That's my entirety of my point. I think aren't the Cody will know. Don't tell me. Aren't the Rangers one of them? And Tampa Bay Lightning? Yeah, there we go. I was going to say Tampa Bay, but then I was like, I wasn't quite sure how the divisions were off the top of my head. So I was like, so you have two East Coast teams. Oh, he's lied to me. It's the Montreal Canadiens. And Tampa Bay. So I was wrong, and you said I was right. You're making me feel no better about this. This is why people don't tune in just for the finals. People.
No, all the hockey fans listening are going, this is embarrassing. This is just terrible.
We're in coastal Georgia. There's no ice. What do you want us to do? It's fine. Take 3. If an all-star game has to have real ramifications, i.e., home field advantage, money, etc., should fans be involved in the voting at that point?
Yeah, I think they should play a part. I don't necessarily think they should be, the totality of it. I know there are kind of various different formulas and levels to all-star voting, but I definitely think fans should have a part because, fans are who make the sport what it is in many respects in terms of the popularity and the excitement. So, yes. Now, do I understand, would I be a little frustrated if I had a great year and didn't get, part of my contract because I wasn't voted to this or that? And maybe it was because, whatever reason I wasn't as popular or high profile. Yeah. But I think there's a way where you can make sure the fans have some influence, some impact, perhaps without it directly impacting if guys are able to reach a certain financial threshold. But should fans have a say? Absolutely. Fans should have a say in who they get to see in all-star games.
Yes, fans should have a say because fans have a say in everything else. They buying tickets, they watching on TV, they making sure they buying jerseys, popcorn. Yes, fans should have a say. Nothing is more biased than all-star voting. When it comes to these coaches, you don't think these coaches got different vendettas when it comes to these players? You're voting players in because of popularity, not because of how they play. It's supposed to be who's playing the best right now. Now who's the most popular? Now who got the most fans? Now who's in the biggest cities with the biggest media markets with the biggest influence? It's supposed to be the best player. So for me, let the fans do it because the fans are only doing what these coaches are doing and are voting with a bias involved. So let them vote. That way, at least you can see where these coaches stand. So yeah, let the fans do it. It's already very, very flawed. I mean, you go back to some of these all-star ballots. Some guys make the all-star team and they barely even in the top, 10 in their position that year. So let the fans do it because the fans are actually watching the game, not seeing, who getting the most boos and cheers when they arrive at these stadiums and things of that nature. So yeah, let them vote.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you're going to tie stuff to it, leave the fans out of it because we can have, multimedia campaigns and all of a sudden you have a starting outfield that consists of nothing but New York Yankees, or you could have a couple years ago that the Cubs put forth the campaign to have their entire starting lineup be in the All-Star game as the starters. Come on. You can't tie anything serious to that. If you don't want to tie it to anything, let the fans do whatever they want to do. But you can't put any kind of caveat to the All-Star game and let the fans do what they do. To me, it's a little ridiculous. That's take 3. We do it each every day this time. We'll come back. We've got more. We'll talk some college football. Before we do that, did want to throw this breaking news out there. Trae Young apparently diagnosed with a bruised foot or a bone bruise in his foot, listed as questionable for tomorrow. And Ben just fell over.
I mean, that's tough. That's tough. You know, you wish Trey the best. You hate that for him. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. That sounds like it would be really tough to go out and just kind of push through, because you're talking about the nature of his game. You know, he's running, he's sprinting, he's jumping. Every basketball player cutting this and that. That's going to be tough, and I have no doubt Trey's doing everything he can to get ready to go. But man, that is tough news.
It is. I'm hoping for a speedy recovery. I know that he's going to do all he can to try to get out there and play. But BJ, you already know. Here it comes. Here come the old. He ain't built for this. I told you, he was too small. He can't. No, tell the ref to get out the way. Hey, ref, you see this guy moving? Yeah, get out of his way. Like he's going to step right here. But come on, Trey, battle through it. Pain threshold time. We'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. I would imagine, as Ben says, if you're out there, no excuses. We'll see what happens. But obviously in the playoffs, you try to give it that little extra to get out there and give it a go. We've got more to come here. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here. 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. A lot to get to here in hour number 2, including a big thing that happened over the weekend. Caught a lot of people there around the College World Series. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But we talked about some college football what ifs, or if this happens, how can this team stay in the national championship picture? Let's look at the Dogs here. Bill Connolly put out a list. He's got 3 if questions. If late season JT Daniels shows up and you get that for a full season, if you get some pass catchers that step up, and if a brand new secondary shows up, good things will happen for Georgia. Which one of those ifs do you think is the biggest one in your mind?
Perhaps the secondary, just because there's so much roster turnover. But if I'm being honest, I don't really have questions with Georgia's roster. I think when you look at this team on paper, where would the questions even be? I mean, I think you feel really good about JT Daniels at quarterback. The depth at running back is unrivaled. You have playmakers, wide receiver, tight end. I think the offensive line is going to be really good. The defensive front's elite. The linebackers are great. And in the secondary, even though there's some newness, you're talking about All-Americans coming in via transfer. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have said cornerback, but I think the addition of Darian Kendrick gives you one of the best 5, 6, 7 corners in the entire country. Even special teams. Look at special teams. Georgia's great there. So I don't really know where the questions are with the roster. My question is this, and really I think you can be quite simple with your evaluation of Georgia pertaining to a national championship. Can you beat one of Clemson or Alabama? Because if you don't, and I'm not totally discrediting Florida, Ben, but I'm just kind of talking it out on paper. If Georgia cannot beat one of Clemson or we assume Alabama in the SEC championship game, they're not going to the Final Four. And I think that's a heck of a standard, because you could make an argument in that scenario. And again, we're talking about a hypothetical here, but Georgia could be the 3rd best team in the country, but not make the Final Four. And if Georgia were to lose, let's say in the opener to Clemson, and then lose, let's say in the SEC championship game to Alabama, all that would be reflective of is that you weren't better than Clemson and you weren't better than Alabama. And there are many preseason polls that have Clemson or Alabama, if not most preseason polls, in some form or fashion, 1 or 2. So I think Georgia's in a really difficult spot, because to me, they're going to have to beat one of the number 1 or number 2 teams in the country to make the college football playoff. And here's what's really interesting about that. If you were to ask me how many teams, if Georgia played, theoretically any team in the country, who would I pick Georgia to lose to? There would only be 2 teams, Clemson and Alabama. I would pick Georgia over Ohio State. I would pick Georgia over Oklahoma. I would pick Georgia over Notre Dame. I would pick Georgia over Cincinnati. But the problem is, and maybe it's a problem, maybe it's an opportunity, but Georgia's going to have to beat one of the top 2 teams in the country in the preseason. And if they don't do that, if Georgia goes 10-2 or 11-2, whatever, and only loses to Clemson and Alabama, I don't think they're making the college football playoff.
For me, I think the pass catches is a legitimate, BJ, because the whole thing about it is, I mean, when you start looking at some of the best teams in the country, you're going to have to be able to do it through the air, and you're going to have to be able to do it through the air on a consistent level. When you look at Alabama last year, I know they had, Najee Harris and what he was able to do, but they also had some big-time pass catches. For me, I like Jermaine Burton. I like Eric Gilbert. But you start thinking to yourself, okay, these guys are going to be at the forefront when they used to letting the running game be at the forefront. JT Daniels, his health is very, very important. If JT Daniels gets hurt, who is your backup? So I do think that JT Daniels having a full slate, because like we said, we saw him in 4 games. Look, I mean, his debut against Mississippi State went about as good as they can get. Him and Jermaine Burton had something going on. I think Jermaine Burton had like 8 for 197, 2 touchdowns. But for me, JT Daniels, a kid from California, who didn't know what Athens was until he got off the plane, is going to lead you to a place you haven't been to in 41 years. I'm not saying he can't. George Pickens going out, now you got to replace him. Eric Gilbert is probably going to play the X position and not the tight end position, so that you can have him and Donnell Washington on the field at the same time. You're right. When you're talking about this secondary, though, once again, BJ, you are an injury away, because you don't have depth in the secondary. You got some great fill-ins. So That secondary, you know, they're going to have to gel. I do think having Kendrick is going to be a gigantic boost. But I just think for me, it's going to come down to JT Daniels and the rapport he had with the receivers, because we don't even talk about the running game in Georgia no more. So for me, JT, his health, the rapport with the receivers is going to be huge if Georgia's trying to get what they're trying to get.
Yeah, I think to me the receiving one is a big one, because you lost the guy that was expected to be your big play threat. Now I know you brought some guys in, BJ, that you think are going to fill that role nicely, but to me, I think that is totally valid if the receivers can step up, if a pass catcher emerges and steps up, because if you're talking about winning a national championship, you know you're going to have to do it at least game one against Clemson. Probably going to see it 3 or 4 times in SEC play against elite corners where somebody's going to have to get open and make a play. And, of course, potentially Alabama in the SEC championship game. And if you make the playoff, maybe Alabama again. So I do think that is one that it's easy to say, well, they'll be fine. I mean, is there a reason you haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver but one time in your history? I mean, I think that's a legitimate question.
Well, I think the reason historically that I believe you've only had Terrence Edwards go over 1,000 yards is because you normally run the football. You know, you think of Georgia's brand, you think of a program that not only historically has one elite running back, but 2, 3, 4. I mean, you go back and look at some of these Georgia running back depth charts over the years, and you might have 3, 4 pro backs in the same backfield, you know, maybe even sometimes more than that. So it's amazing to think about. And look, that's why Georgia's running back you. That's why when you, list off the best running backs in Georgia history, you better take a deep breath, because you're going to say about 9, 10, 11, 12 guys before you even settle in. Now, to me, that's not an indictment of the fact that you can't be proficient throwing the football this fall. And look, of course, losing George Pickens hurts. That's a guy that was going to get some All-American consideration, was probably going to be a first-round pick, and you're wishing him the best. But I still think when you look at what you have out wide, you're still comparable, if not better, than even the top 10, top 15 teams in the country. When you think about adding Eric Gilbert, who did some things as a true freshman that haven't really been done statistically in the SEC, and he's a guy that's sort of a hybrid playmaker. I mean, I'm not comparing anybody to Kyle Pitts, but I think that Eric Gilbert, at least in theory, has the potential to be that matchup problem on the perimeter. And then, you look at Kearis Jackson. Kearis Jackson, actually not George Pickens, was Georgia's leading receiver last year, granted by 1 yard. He had 514 yards. Pickens had 513, but you talk about Kearis Jackson, you talk about Jermaine Burton, you're talking about getting Dominic Blaylock back from injury, you're talking about some of the young guys. I think James Cook's really going to be featured in the passing game. So I'm not worried about Georgia's passing game. I'm really not. And I don't want to come across as oversimplifying the season, which I know I am doing, but to me it just comes down to this. And I don't want to say it's unfair, because, look, you play in the SEC, and I think games like Georgia-Clemson are good for college football. And what, Kevin, in 2 or 3 years, they're going to be even more of a fixture when we have the 12-team college football playoff. But I feel very comfortable saying here in late June that Georgia is going to have to beat either Clemson or Alabama to make the college football playoff. And those two teams, in the eyes of most analysts, I would assume, are 1-2 or 2-1 in some order in college football. So you're going to have to beat one of the top 2 teams in the country to make the playoff. And Ohio State doesn't have that problem. Notre Dame doesn't have that problem. Oklahoma doesn't have that problem. Alabama doesn't have that problem. Clemson doesn't have that problem. So that is a singularly Georgia issue for this season. That's the highest possible standard in college football. If you were to create a schedule and say, hey, man, what's the hardest possible schedule you could create for a team to get in the playoff? Well, I think you would say, look, you got to beat Clemson at the beginning of the year. You got to beat Alabama at the end of the year. And that's what Georgia has. So to me, that's what it comes down to. Are you better than one of the 2 leading programs, 2 dynasty programs in college football right now?
Yeah, that's a fair point. No one's saying that Georgia don't got to run the gauntlet, because I do think that BJ, starting off the season with Clemson, and people say, okay, if you lose the game with Clemson, you still control your own destiny. Because when the last time Georgia went undefeated in the SEC? So the whole thing about it is, I think it's that SEC gauntlet bigger than Clemson. I understand that making it to Atlanta and having to play Alabama, but losing to Alabama could potentially still afford you an opportunity to be in the college football playoff, depending on what you did. But when's the last time Georgia went undefeated in the regular season? Definitely in the SEC. I'm yet to see it. So yes, that Clemson game, is definitely going to be a big one, and you still got to go through, because taking away Clemson game, BJ, you still got to go through the SEC schedule to then eventually meet Alabama or the winner of the SEC West, which could, potentially be Texas A&M, because Alabama don't need to play in Atlanta to even go to the college football playoff. So for me, I think it's that SEC gauntlet. But BJ, you said something. Kearis Jackson, he led the team in catches and yards, so by 1 yard. Jermaine Burton, I think, had like 400 something yards. That doesn't just turn into 1,000 over a year. So for me, it is going to come down to it, because if you think that they want JT Daniels handing the football off, that's not. Ego will get you beat more than scheme ever will. They're going to want to throw the football. Monken is going to be like, let's let Ray back and throw it. I don't know if that's going to be a recipe for success, but make no mistake about it, they got JT Daniels to throw the football. They didn't bring Eric Gilbert in to see how he can, stop block, DBs down the field. No, they finna try to get this ball down the field. And, it's like you said, BJ, they got some weapons, but they're going to have to jail sooner rather than later. You taking a tight end, making them a receiver. When you tell a running back, they're going to have to learn how to catch out the backfield when they was there to run in between the tackles. It sounds really, really good, but it's only one rock, but you got a lot of miles to feed.
All right, we've got it. We'll see how it plays out, and if some of those questions get answered moving forward. We've got more to come here on 3-9, including the NCAA in the ire of the college sports world again. Imagine that. We'll get to what happened this weekend next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Well, the NCAA is kind of at it again, BJ and Ben. This weekend, the College World Series, of course, if you're following that, it's been a whole lot of fun. I mean, the game's been really competitive, a lot of drama there as well. But Friday afternoon, NC State and Vanderbilt were set to play, and then taken off the field. Some COVID things happened, and NC State ended up playing that game with 14 players, which is not a lot at all, especially in that kind of scenario due to some COVID-19 testing. Then at 2, they played that game with Vanderbilt. They lost. They were supposed to play again. Saturday's game was declared a no contest, and Vanderbilt goes to the College World Series. NC State, which had played tremendously well, thus eliminated and had to go home. They released that statement at 2:15 in the morning on Saturday morning before they were supposed to play Saturday afternoon. And a lot of people said, okay, well, it's COVID protocols. We want everybody to be safe. We get that. The NCAA released a statement, said the NCAA and the committee regret that NC State student athletes and coaching staff will not be able to continue in the championship in which they earned the right to participate. And that was kind of what they put out there as their statement. I know from reports, the players that tested positive were vaccinated players for NC State as well. And a lot of people said, well, what's the deal with testing vaccinated people versus this, that, what have you. The NCAA has been kind of mum on the whole thing, other than to say NC State can't compete for the championship anymore. And I think a lot of people past the initial thoughts of, vaccine protocols was, why doesn't the NCAA say anything other than you can't play?
Yeah, I was going to say, Kevin, I think you feel terrible for NC State. Obviously, they've had a great season. They were right there, competing for a national championship. And you mentioned it. I think you and I were in the studio getting ready for the show on Friday, and we were kind of watching it unfold on television and trying to piece it all together because, and granted, you and I were kind of coming out of meetings and watching it on the television, but, players and staff were being kind of pulled off the field, and they were trying to establish sort of a schedule or a protocol for what was going to occur. And you just feel terrible for NC State. And, you certainly hope everybody's okay. But yeah, I think the lack of sort of communication and clarity is what's frustrating. You would want to know sort of the full totality of what happened, what the justification was, what the reasoning was, what the considerations were, what the rules were, what the guidelines were, and kind of have all of that open for people to kind of process and understand. And yes, sort of the 2:15 in the morning announcement. I know a lot of people said, hey, look, we got to do a little better than just an announcement ending a season at, a point in time where 99% of people are asleep, 2:15, 2:30, whatever it is in the morning. So I think the lack of clarity, the lack of communication is what bothers a lot of people, and understandably so. And I think you just kind of want a clear picture of what happened, what the options potentially were, what the protocol was, and sort of a better understanding of what happened and why we unfortunately got the result we got.
That sounds like the NCAA to me. When you start asking yourself why, you talk about all these different things that's coming now with the name and image likeness and all these different things. It looks like the NCAA is getting in line. No, this is what the NCAA does. 2:15 in the morning. Like you said, BJ, when people are sleeping. So that when it's breaking news, we sleeping. We're not even watching it right now. To make, how hard it is to make it to even be in the contention to make the college football, the College World Series, to then be stripped of it. And it's, once again, like the college football playoff committee, why can't you just tell us why you did it? Like, we understand. So that showed us that y'all don't really have a COVID-19 protocol. Y'all don't really have a plan B, a backup plan. If your plan is, we hope to God that nothing happens and nobody tests positive, because why? Because, dude, we don't have a plan B. Well, what is your plan B? Announced it at 2:15. So we did announce it, but everybody said, I feel bad. I feel bad for those players because, number one, you are vaccinated, and yes, I guess there's a protocol out there, Kevin and BJ, for which we don't know about. But to strip these players with no explanation, you can't even explain. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people got frustrated with this because, again, I think when you're going to make a policy that potentially, and in this case it did, in somebody's season in which they were competing for a championship. I mean, it's not like they did this in February or March. They were one win away from a team they had already beaten from playing a best-of-3 series for a national championship. Keep in mind, these are all the same players as well who were in the middle of their baseball season a year ago, and they just shut it down completely, right? So they went through all that, got enough into the protocols to come back and play, and now this happens because, BJ, I think the logical question here to the NCAA is, okay, so Friday afternoon, you allowed them to play with 14 players, by the way, but you allowed them to play. A few hours later, you canceled their season. Like, what changed? Also, people look at it and say, under your own kind of guidelines for people watching, NC State couldn't play in the College World Series, but those same student athletes could go to the ticket window, give you their money, and sit in a 25,000 seat stadium perfectly fine, and nobody would have said anything. How do you explain that? And we're not going to get an answer to that. I don't believe. So I just look at it and you say, it's one thing way back when in the ACC championship, SEC championship, when, COVID-19's first hitting, we're like, hey, there's a lot we don't know. And a lot of things, this and that. We probably should just stop playing. But you allowed a team to continue playing on Friday and then later said, no, you can't play. So what changed? You allowed them to play with 14 players, by the way, and that was okay. And then they couldn't play the next day. So, and I don't think we're going to get an explanation. I think it's a bad way to end somebody's season. It's a bad way to potentially end somebody's career if you don't have a future in minor league baseball or what have you. I mean, this is a special time cut short due to, at this point, a lack of clarity as to why you even did it, other than to say the team was in COVID-19 protocols.
Well, and I think those words we've all used are the key ones. Clarity, consistency, communication. Kind of what were the guidelines that were in place, as Ben alluded to. What were the protocols? And Ben, you made a good point. What was the secondary option, or what was the plan B? If something like this unfortunately were to happen, and it did. What were the responses going to be in terms of the scheduling, the logistics, the tournament, and would there be consistency across all fronts? And again, you feel terrible for NC State. I mean, just awful because it's the end of a season, and that's terrible all the way around. But you're right there competing for a national championship, and you just wonder what all was at play in terms of what was considered, what was weighed, what was communicated, what was potentially possible. And I think we all agree. I think everybody agrees. Obviously, health and safety has to be paramount and first and foremost. But kind of what were the thresholds that were set kind of entering into the weekend? And to Kevin's point, kind of what changed? What was the differentiating factor where, it suddenly became, hey, there's nothing we can do. We have to shut it down. And we didn't get great clarity on that. And from what I understand, there haven't been kind of subsequent sets of information released. I don't think at this point to provide kind of a great synopsis or an overview of what happened, what didn't happen, what could have happened, and it just ended abruptly. And it's terrible. Again, you hate it. You hate it for everybody involved. But I think those are the key words when I look at this: is the clarity, the communication, and the consistency didn't seem to be there. And I think given the seriousness of all this, and obviously what's going on, you have to have those things in place.
2:15 a.m. in the morning, unless you're police officer, a doctor, you work in the graveyard shift. These are the only people that's up, right? People always start talking about why I don't like that word amateurism, because that's how they treat you. They treating these dudes like they don't even matter. You're gonna cancel our season, and listen, and we're actually going through the protocols. We're getting vaccinated, and we still caught it. But there was no plan B. And you don't even make an explanation. Check this out. If Alabama was playing Clemson in the national championship, you think they would have did it? No. They would have put, I guarantee you they're gonna have a plan B and C, because Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney matter. People don't know who plays for North Carolina State and Vanderbilt baseball, not nationally. And that's how they're treating them. So for me, it says more about the NCAA and their lack for these young people and how hard it is to do what they do. They still got to go to class and do all these things. You telling me, hey, my college experience is I was in school during the COVID-19 pandemic, took the vaccine, got infected, and they shut down our season with no explanation at 2:15 a.m. in the morning. That is nonsense, man. That is nonsense. So that's the part I have an even bigger problem with. No explanation, as if like it never happened. Like the game never happened. And like you said, Kevin, they just played. So they can watch, but they can't play. And because they don't got enough players now, we did put out an explanation. It's just, my send button didn't work till 2 a.m. That's nonsense.
No, and again, I don't think anybody's saying who are the players that caused
exactly.
Like nobody's asking that. They're just simply saying, look, apparently you had positive tests. Apparently at least 4 of them were vaccinated players that had a positive test, which you had said by your own admission, you probably weren't even testing those guys, but once every couple of weeks. Why the decision when you allowed them to play? Like, again, BJ, we were here. They played at 3 o'clock, first pitch 3 o'clock on Friday, played the full game, and then at 2 in the morning, all that data changed over the course of just a couple of hours to cause you to cancel it. And again, a lot of people are saying, well, what happens if NC State miraculously beats Vanderbilt, eliminates Vanderbilt on Friday, and then can't play? Do you give somebody a national championship at that point?
Yeah, theoretically, in that scenario, I mean, and again, we're very much speculating, but theoretically in that scenario, you're offering up, I guess, Mississippi State, if they would have been true to this, would have been, I guess, awarded the national championship via a no contest.
I believe that was after they beat Texas. That would have been how they handle it, from what I understand. But I mean, that's what you're talking about when you're that close. One more win, you let them play against Vanderbilt once. They were scheduled to play again.
And when they played on Friday, you mentioned, just so folks know, when they played on Friday, I believe, I'm trying to double check the notes, NC State only had 4 pitchers. So they played a game, very short-handed. But yeah, the lack of clarity and just kind of the way this all unfolded, you hate it for NC State and for that program. And it's just, you need more clarity, you need more communication, more consistency through all this.
I don't think people understand how hard it is to do what you do. Like I don't think people think, oh, anybody can just play NC State baseball. No, anybody could just no. When I was in the National Football League, we would have a meeting strictly talking about scenarios. All right, this person's down. Who's up? All right, this person who's the backup kicker? Who's the backup? We would sit there and go through. They would test you to see what happens if that happens, so you got to go check. Okay, I'm the backup kicker. I'm the emergency. And yet, but the thing is, they gave you explanations, right? There wasn't no things just happened and we just walked off. People need to stop playing with these people. Intelligence, stop playing with these people. It is not hard it is not easy to be a student athlete. This stuff is not easy. Everybody talking about, oh, everybody want to be in these seats. Well, you one of them. Kevin, I never played baseball. You know why? Because I can't. Because I'm not good enough to do it. I cannot play baseball, but I know how hard it is to play Division I athletics, period, male or female. And you mean to tell me I'm at the pinnacle and it's over and I get no explanation? That is BS. And that is the height of why I can't stand the NCAA right there. It ain't because it ain't football. It's NCAA. So when people say being NCAA doing the right thing, no, they're getting bullied into it. They don't want to have nothing to do with protocols, NIL, none of this stuff, man. So I mean, that's like I said, it don't got to be they are family members of mine because we all represent the same entity known as Division I sports. And you telling me a family member of mine saying, hey, what's up, cuzzo? Hey, man, we got shut down 2 a.m. in the morning. Hey, what they said? Nothing. We on our way home.
They said, we're sorry, but you can't play. That was basically the statement. We're sorry, but it's a no contest. But, hey, we got to step aside. We got more to come. It's 3 and out, including we're looking at the Hawks. Can they bounce back, banged up, and maybe even more so after some news this afternoon? We'll get to that top of next hour all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. A lot to get to coming up in the final hour of the program, including the Atlanta Hawks, now down 1-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the very latest on some of the injury news out there for Atlanta. We'll get to that coming up as well. The Braves split a series in Cincinnati, continue to keep pace. Obviously, they've got problems, BJ and Ben, they've got to fix. We'll look at those as well. We'll continue to talk college football as we look at some if questions for Florida, Texas A&M there in the SEC.
Not a great weekend for the Braves, but was impressed with Kyle Muller. You know, you have some questions with your starting five, with your rotation, Kevin. It looks like he's earned the right to be there, be one of those five guys. He looked really good, had one hit allowed in his last start in Cincinnati. And to do that in that ballpark, that's getting it done.
Right now, the Braves, Kevin, I mean, they're just scratching and clawing with who they got left. I feel bad for Snit, let alone he don't know who the hell the Braves pitching staff is walking through the locker room. He got to just be like, listen, fellas, we just scratching and clawing. But shout out to the homer, Ron Acuna Jr., who's still finding a way to get it done. A beautiful homer for his 21st, I think, of the season.
Oh, sure. And again, he continues to carry this team right now offensively in a big, big way. And it could be a lot worse if not for number 13 out there for the Atlanta Braves coming up and doing what he's doing each and every night. A lot more to come here on the show. As I mentioned in the final hour, hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. We are also broadcasting live Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can follow us there if you miss any portion of the show. ESPNCoastal.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel. You can get a podcasted version of the show each and every day. Catch all the best moments from 3 and Out. Final hour coming up. We're talking Hawks, and including that injury news we just got this afternoon next here on 3 and Out. Final hour of 3 and Out on this Monday. Glad you're with us here all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. A lot to get to here in the final hour, including the Hawks down 2-1 to the Milwaukee Bucks. Did not go well in the closing stanza of the game last night. Trae Young with a rolled ankle, and BJ and Ben, we find out this afternoon, MRI reveals a bone bruise on his right foot. He is listed as questionable for Game 4 tomorrow night. So again, if you go by the little chart, you have out, doubtful, questionable, probable, and you're playing. He's kind of in that 50-50 category of whether he goes or not, and that is significant because I think a lot of people feel like if he doesn't go, well, that's about it for the Hawks' chances there in Game 4.
Yeah, very significant. And I'll say this because we constantly reference Atlanta's balance scoring the basketball, right? And that's an important aspect of who this team is. But that balance has been regarding a second scorer. That balance has been who's been the number 2, the number 3 option. Trae Young has clearly and overwhelmingly been the number 1 option, not only scoring, but as Ben has mentioned as well, distributing the basketball. But think about this. Atlanta's played 15 playoff games. Trae Young has been the singular leading scorer in 14 of them. And in the one where he wasn't the singular leading scorer, he was the co-leading scorer. He and Danilo Gallinari both had 21 points. So every single playoff game you've had, 15 of them, Trae Young has been the outright leading scorer in 14 of them. And in one of those games, he was the co-leading scorer. So he makes everything go. Obviously, you have a lot of faith in guys like Kevin Huerter and Lou Williams and Clint Capella and John Collins and Danilo Gallinari and Bojan Bogdanovic or Bogdan Bogdanovic. Hopefully you get a little more out of him moving forward. I know he's been battling injury as well, but if you think about Trae Young not being 100%, maybe not even being 75%, maybe not even being able to go, you think about Bogdanovic, again, who's not 100%, and I think you've seen that. It's really tough. I mean, it's really tough. That takes a lot out of you. And if Trae can't go, and I'm sure he's doing absolutely everything within his power, any and everything possible to be as good as he potentially can be tomorrow. But if he can't go, I mean, look, you don't have to be a basketball analyst or an expert insider to say that's a major, major issue. So if Trae Young cannot go, you're not the same team. If he's not 100%, you're not the same team. But at this point, man, it's the playoffs. Ben, you've said it. You go out there, you give it your all, you have a chance to win. Why? Because you have the opportunity to win. I know you've said that a lot when people go, oh, this team, there's no way they can win. Yes, they can because they're out there. And I do want to say this, and I'm not referencing the injury situation specifically, but I know a lot of people, the momentum seems to really be in favor of the Bucks, and understandably. A lot of people right now are saying, oh, man, you've lost 2 in a row. You're now down in the series. Well, if the series would have gone chalk, I know, Kevin, you like to talk about, picking chalk. If the series would have gone as expected, we'd be in the same spot. And that was Milwaukee winning game 1 and 2 at home, and then Atlanta winning game 3 at home. If that would have happened, I think we would all feel much more optimistically, and that would have been kind of a chalk series where, to quote the experts, nothing out of the ordinary would have happened. But because Atlanta won game 1 and it immediately kind of reconfigured the expectations, we all feel differently. So Trae's injury aside, this series is still very much manageable for Atlanta. If you win tomorrow night, you're sitting here at 2 apiece, and I think everybody's talking about the Hawks again. But there's no way to sugarcoat this, man. I mean, Trae Young's one of the best players in the NBA. He just had 35 last night. He had almost 50 a couple of nights ago to go along with 14, 15 assists. If he can't go, you're in a really tough spot. And if he can go and he's not right, you're in a really tough spot. And I think, Ben, all we can say right now regarding Trae's health is we just don't know.
Yeah, you do feel bad for Trae. You feel bad for the Hawks. You feel bad for this organization because Trae has given his heart and soul to his team since he's been there. The problem is nobody else has been that solid number 2. We know who Batman is for the Hawks, right? Who's Robin? I mean, some nights it could be Collins, some nights it could be Gallinari, some nights it could be Clint Capella, some nights it could be Bogdanovic. Those guys need to step up for their brother because the thing is, that Trae is going to come into this game wounded. You know that he's going to be favoring that foot if and when he does be able to go out there, there's pain threshold. He's going to try to go out there and play because, and half of that has to do with the type of player he is, and half of it has to do with national narratives. And you don't think that with how much criticism these players deal with now, they are trying to go in ways they never could before? Name me a superstar that's not on their team that's still in the playoffs. Well, right now, you look at the Clippers, they don't got Kawhi. They down 3-1. You look at the you look at the fact that CP3 is back with, Phoenix. They up 3-1. You see, when the Milwaukee's firing on all cylinders, they hard to beat. The thing about Atlanta is they've never had a Robin. They've been good enough throughout the year to get away with playing team basketball as long as they do what they do. As long as Clint Capella and Collins are both giving you double-digit rebounds. That's what they do. Obviously, you're going to take whatever they give you offensively, but they can't be giving you single-digit rebounds. That means and the thing about Clint Capella, he'll give you 2 or 3 offensive rebounds to give you a couple of more possessions. That kind of stuff doesn't show up in the box score the way it should, but that's a big reason why they won game 1, because he got a big offensive rebound and a putback right there on Giannis. Him and Collins converged on Giannis in game 1 to make sure that when he fouled, he can't give you the and one, take him to the free throw line, earn it the hard way. Those type of things don't show up in the box score, but Trae Young, he's going to say the right things because he's a team player. But he's screaming, fellas, I need one. Because they tie this series up, who knows? Do they win the series? Who knows? But if they do tie and they show, hey, man, we got to show that we can win without me being the focal point. Because up until now, we haven't seen it. I just think that for me, when you're looking at the whole situation, I do feel bad for Trae. But you know what a coach will tell him? Tough. This is sports. I mean, Jordan in the flu game, right? I mean, he had to go out there. And no, Trae don't got a Pippen. He might have to have some Pippins. They might have to do it by, as a collective. But if you Collins, if you Capella, and those guys, I mean, if you, Gallinari and BJ, I don't know what's going on back then. I don't know if he hurt or not, but don't suit up. Because if I show up to the game in uniform, my family going, like, are you going to play? Because you're out there. Like I said, since they said it's a boy, you've been scratching and clawing ever since you came out your mother's womb. That's the last time you was 100%. Deal with it. If I got to fight through an injury during the regular season just to play on a Tuesday night, I'm going to try to fight through injury to play, it's a chance to make it to the NBA Finals. I just think, Kevin and BJ, Collins, Capella and Gallinari and Bogdanovich and Lemon Pepper Lou, y'all owe Trae one because he can't do it by himself. So go out there, and do all, because if you go out there and win and Trae is out there hobbling, what would that mean for a game 5? Would probably give him a reason to go out there and, try to get back right.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts real quick because you mentioned the rebounding. One of the key elements, and you referenced the late offensive rebound from Clint Capella, one of the key elements in Atlanta's Game 1 win against Milwaukee was their rebounding success. Atlanta actually out-rebounded the Bucks, and that was really important because we've said this a couple of times. Milwaukee is the postseason's best rebounding team. That's how they've won, is they're really big. Think you got a 7-footer at small forwards. You got PJ Tucker. You got Lopez. They're a really good team in the paint, and Atlanta out-rebounded Milwaukee in Game 1. In Games 2 and 3 combined, Milwaukee out-rebounded Atlanta 97-69. And perhaps more significant than that, points in paint in Games 2 and 3, Milwaukee scored a combined 118 to Atlanta's 64. That's almost a 2-to-1 scoring advantage in the paint. So, yeah, you're right. And look, it is a tall task because Milwaukee is one of the best rebounding teams, if not the best rebounding team in the NBA. But you've got to be a little bit more effective and efficient in the paint. You've got to get a little more scoring there. It's really hard to score 115, 120 points when, 70% of that's got to come from the perimeter, and especially if Trae Young's not 100% and Bogdanovich is not 100%. You mentioned Bogdanovich, Ben. He was 3 of 16 in Game 3, 3 of 16, and he's a really good shooter. Needless to say, that's an off night, and you need better proficiency from him. I don't think he's healthy. He's been dealing with an injury all postseason, so you're already not 100% in the backcourt with what Bogdanovich is dealing with. But listen, it's going to come down to rebounding. It's going to come down to defense. I'm like you. If I had to guess, I think Trey will be out there. I don't know what that means. You know, Ben, didn't you have a bone bruise at some point on your foot during your playing career? I mean, I don't know how realistic it is to be effective consistently with that. But yeah, you're going to have to rally around him, no doubt.
Yes, and it's like when people ask you, like you're on the sideline and you Quincy and you wincing a little bit, and they saying, "Hey man, how your foot feel? It hurt. How your body feel? It hurt. Man, I'm struggling out here. But this is why I play a team sport. This is why I don't play tennis. This is why I play golf, because I can be selfish as all get out. When it's bigger than me, when there's 10 other guys out there with me, or 4 other guys out here on the court, I'm doing it for y'all. I mean, the pain don't feel as bad when you win, and everything hurts when you lose. Everything. So for me, again, what I love the most about Trey is what's hurting Trey now. Trey got to be selfish enough to tell his teammates, come on, fellas, man, like, I need y'all. I'm going to give y'all all I got. Y'all know that. But I'm coming in hobbled. It's one thing we hurting and no one knows why I'm hurt. Like, I'm Winston, you don't know why. But if that injury report says foot, they're going to be like, hey, man, let's make sure he, force him to that side. Make sure, force him to, plan off that foot. That's what game planning really is, to try to make sure that I favor that injury you guys got. I've had cracked ribs. They might as well have been broke. I had cracked ribs one time. Didn't know. I thought I was the only one knew. And the defensive end, he kept tapping in my side all game. By the time we got to the fourth quarter, I could barely touch it right here because he saw the injury report. He like, man, I'm trying to do all I can to slow you down. That's what they're doing. They're going to do all they can. So the injury finally got to Trey. Now it's time for those other 4 professional basketball players to help their brother. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but if Collins goes out and have the game of his life, who knows what that'll do for game? Who knows what that'll do for game 5? Come on. I mean, can Collins give us, because Collins was there before Trey, right? They was building around Collins first, right? Then Trey got there. Then they started building around Trey. Hey, Collins, go back to who you was before Trey got there. You was giving double doubles. I remember those games. Do it in the playoffs for the world to see. Who knows what would happen? Clint Capella, go out there and be who you are. Gallinari, be that Robert Tiz, Batman, and Bogdanovich. If you are healthy, you need to go out there and play. Because BJ, I can't have no more of these Roy Hibbert type box scores. That stuff get on my nerve. You too big, too good of a player to be like, he did what? 20 minutes a day. So I'm just saying, I'm glad that the Hawks is in this position, but I just think that they're gonna have to give they owe Trey one, and hopefully they'll give him one.
Yeah, again, I think that's the key is how are you going to get Trey Young out there? If so, how well can he go and how long can he go? I mean, if he's hobbled at 70%, can he play 40 minutes for you in the ball game? I think that's going to be a huge, huge key there for Atlanta moving into to Game 4. But he is listed as questionable for Game 4 tomorrow night. We've got more to come. We're talking college football next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back, 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you are with us talking college football here on a Monday afternoon. And Bill Connolly, ESPN.com, college football, put out his ifs list for things that, if this happens, this team could go to the national championship, be really, really good. Let's look at the Florida Gators here in this one. If the pass catchers only slide back a little bit, losing Kyle Pitts. If Emory Jones was worth the wait. If that D-line holds up, and if turnover in the secondary was actually a good thing. I think, to me, the biggest if for Florida is if Emory Jones was worth the wait, it could be really, really good. And if it wasn't, where are you at as a program? I think that's probably the biggest one for me, guys.
Yeah, I think Jones is going to do a nice job. I think he's shown what he's capable of. I think he's going to do a really good job. Now, I think, the turnover at pass catcher is significant. And Ben, of course, you can speak to this, but there's no way to replace Kyle Pitts. I mean, you're talking about a tight end. I'm looking at his stats now, who averaged 18 yards per catch and had 12 touchdowns. That's absurd. And then you're also talking about Kadarius Toney, who had almost 1,000 yards, and Trevon Grimes, who had 9 touchdowns. So you're talking about prolific producers out on the perimeter. I think when I look at Florida, at least at first glance, my question is, your playmakers out wide, can they maintain the status quo, at least in some ways, from a year ago?
Yeah, I stay away from that. And when you say stuff like regress a little, well, what does that mean? I mean, you're talking about, BJ, 3 guys accounted for what? Almost 30 touchdowns, and then you looking at, and bigger than the touchdowns, right? The impact. If Kyle Pitts
over 30 touchdowns.
And I think, as much as Kyle Pitts is a unicorn, a talent we've never seen before, I think the one that really made it go was Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney would have went over 1,000 yards had he played in the bowl game. And the same way we talking about, Georgia only having 1,000-yard receiver in their existence. Florida ain't had one in a long time. It's been a long time since Florida had a 1,000-yard receiver. But yes, I do think it's going to come down to the play of Emory Jones. And the reason why I say that is, look at Dan Mullen's track record. Dak Prescott, Nick Fitzgerald, Tim Tebow. Felipe Franks, Kyle Trask. Now, Emory Jones has the running ability, of a Dak, of a Nick Fitzgerald. I think he has a throwing ability of a Felipe. But you need him to be accurate like Kyle. You need to have a deep ball, like Felipe. You need him to have the athleticism of a Dak, and dare I say the tenacity of a Tebow. Now, I know that's asking a lot of him, but Dan Mullen didn't recruit Felipe. He didn't recruit Kyle Trask, and look at what they became. The guy, he looked out and said, all right, I need a quarterback to run this system. He saw Emory Jones. And I remember when, it's already been 4 years. Emory Jones been in college 4 years. Emory Jones is on that Renfro type track, BJ. I think he got his own parking space. He's been there that long, but I think it does going to come. He sat behind 2 incredible talents, one being a Heisman Trophy finalist. Is he ready for the big times? And I will say, bigger than the secondary, Ty Grantham. Can that defense step up this year? Because they're going to have to for Florida, because sometimes the offense is going to be struggling a little bit to be able to stay in games. But Emory Jones, is he ready for the big times? I know it goes back to what, and I'm not comparing me to Emory by no way, shape, or form, but it's like what Rex Grossman told me going into my senior. He says, are you ready to be a headliner? And I didn't know what that meant. I hope Emory Jones has took notes. Because he went from, oh my goodness, he went from McElwain. Now, to now you're talking about a guy, and Dan Mullen, who definitely has him going. So if Emory Jones, BJ, can live up to the hype, Florida got a shot to be as good as they want to be.
Yeah, I think that's like the core of these if questions we're getting to with Bill Connolly is Emory Jones. Is it worth the wait for him and for Florida, I guess, at the end of the day, to stick around and bide your time and wait to be the guy? Because he's seen a lot of guys kind of step in front of him and say, oh, not quite there yet, Emory Jones. We're going to let somebody else do it. And we'll see if patience was a virtue in this case, I guess.
Yeah, and Emory understands what not to do. See, a lot of times, too, when you're watching somebody in front of you, it's, I need to emulate what they do. No, you need to emulate what they're not doing. That's what they don't tell you. Emory is more, I guess, talented both running and throwing the football than Felipe and Kyle. He's more talented than them as a dual threat quarterback. But if you Florida, hey man, I want to see what Kyle did. Because this is the thing. Both Kyle and Felipe Franks both had offensive performances in New Year's Six games that led to victories. I mean, Felipe Franks was a Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl Offensive Player of the Year. I was there, saw it in person. He played his best game. Kyle Trask is the reason why they won that Peach Bowl, because Virginia gave Florida everything they can handle. Emory, you next up. And that's how it should be. It shouldn't be who you replacing, you next up. So Emory, you come behind Felipe, you come behind Kyle, who's what, I want some change down the road, in Tampa. Go out there and show that you're ready for the moment, because there's some guys behind Felipe, like Richardson and those guys. Oh, they're good enough to go out there, and take his spot. Hey, Emory, don't wait. Don't be like, I waited 3 years to finally get my shot to go out there and do it. And I was like, you ain't snatching this from me. I don't come hell or high water. I don't care if my quarterback was 18 years old out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I say, hey, let's go. So Emory, I think he's the guy for the job. But BJ and Kevin, unfortunately, we get to see him. We get to see him try to go out there and pass that test every Saturday, and it is not going to be easy.
I think he's going to do a nice job and have a big year. And just to recap, it is crazy to think, right, that you look at Dan Mullen having success with Felipe Franks in Gainesville. You look at Dan Mullen having success with Kyle Trask in Gainesville. He didn't recruit either of those guys. He's finally got his guy. I think he's going to have a big year.
Again, let's look at some of the other another school there in the SEC. You talk about Texas A&M, kind of the challenger to Alabama. Here's what Bill Connolly has to say about them. If Haynes King or Zach Calzada are ready to be big time, and we know what that means now at Texas A&M, the level you've got to play to if you want to contend. If the new O-line is ready, that's obviously a huge key in any SEC offense. If Jimbo can avoid becoming predictable on offense, and if that pass defense improves, those are some of the key ifs for Texas A&M to try to get there in 2021.
A lot of returning talent in College Station. They're amongst the most experienced teams in all of college football. But at the quarterback position, you have to replace a 4-year starter, and you just don't see that. And I saw Kellen Mond play a couple of times in person. Just a really talented guy, underappreciated, I think, around the country. And you got to find a way to replace his veteran consistency, his leadership, his production as a passer, as a runner, his ability to win games, his ability to sort of calm the team when there's all kind of craziness going on in a game, or maybe it's 38-37. It's one thing going through that with a junior or senior quarterback. It's another thing going through that with an inexperienced quarterback. And I think it's going to be Haynes King, and I think he's going to have a good year. But you have options. But I also want to kind of sum up this situation with Texas A&M similar to how I did Georgia. Texas A&M last year won every single game but one. They won every single game on their schedule except one. They lost to Alabama, and they lost to Alabama by 28 points. I know they finished 5th in the country. That is incredible. That's a great year. I know they were the first team out of the college football playoff, and maybe you could have made an argument, and I'm sure their fans were, we should be in the college football playoff. We only lost to Alabama. But how many people were talking about Texas A&M at the end of last year? Not many. And I think if you have the exact same thing happen in 2021, you're kind of going to be in a similar place. Are you going to beat Alabama? I mean, Ben, I know that's a heck of a standard, but this past year, you beat everybody else on your schedule. You went to the Orange Bowl and won that game by what, 14, 17 points? You beat LSU. You beat Auburn. But at the end of the day, if you don't beat Alabama, and I know this is harsh, I know it is, but at the end of the day, if you don't beat Alabama, you are at best second best in a 7-team division. You're at best second best in a 7-team division. Now, in theory, you could still be top 3, top 4, top 5 in the country, but I'm talking about perception. And you lost to Alabama by 28 points last year. If you're not any better, I don't know that the situation changes. And I know you've said, Kevin, time and time again, one of the games of the year is going to be that Alabama A&M game. And I agree. That's a chance for Texas A&M to kind of change everything. And look, Jimbo's had A&M in the top 5. He's won a national championship. He's one of the best coaches in the country. But for all the ifs about Texas A&M, I feel compelled to say this. If you don't beat Alabama, I don't know that it changes anything. Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but BJ, isn't that, to me, that's fair. Because It's Texas A&M was one of the teams before the rankings come out. They got a shot to be one of the last 4 teams standing, and we understand that they're in the toughest division in football. But that's the consolation prize, right? Arkansas in the SEC West, nothing's gonna happen. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, they bottom feeders, right? Auburn, LSU, Texas A&M, and Alabama got a shot to be one of the 4 teams. Texas A&M bigger than the players. Is Jimbo the guy? Jimbo changed the way we look at coaches' contracts because he was the first fully get 10 years, $75 million, and I'm not counting his cheese. That was public record. It was ESPN bottom line. So bottom line, $7.5 million supposed to get you an SEC West appearance. Championship. And then to go to Atlanta. Haven't seen Texas A&M. The reason why Texas A&M came to the SEC is because they got tired of being the Big 12 having to compete against Texas every year for recruits, but they don't got to compete because now they're in the SEC, way out there. So I just think that for me, BJ, the scheme is there. The hay's in the barn. I know Kellen Mond been there a long time too. It's gonna be hard, but are they ready for the big? Jimbo Fisher talking trash in the offseason? It was all fun and games, right? I mean, I know we talked about the whole Kirby Smart situation thing with Kirby, with Nick Saban holding Kirby as a baby. That could have been Jimbo Fisher face down on that baby. That could have been Ed Ogeron on that baby, even though Ed Ogeron won one time. So I think for me, it's the coach, because we get caught up in the players, right? I always say, well, if it ain't the players, if it ain't the scheme, what is it? Jimbo left Florida State because for the money, to go to Texas A&M to get the money to beat Alabama. He got the money. He hasn't beaten Alabama yet. So,
but I guess this is what I'm asking. This is what I'm asking is if Texas A&M wins every game on their schedule this year except one in the regular season, is anything different?
No, because it comes to that. What I'll be saying, it's not how many fights you had, it's who you fought. If the people you're fighting, right, don't measure up to you, I expect you to beat them. But why is it you can't beat the people that measure up to you? And not only do you get beat down. Alabama beat Texas A&M down. For me, BJ, I think last year the barometer for Texas A&M was not to beat Alabama. It was to beat Florida. Because remember, people kept saying, well, Jimbo Fisher don't have a signature win on this record. Well, now he got it with Dan Mullen. All right, well, you ain't playing Florida this year. Now you got to beat Alabama. We'll see if he's ready for it.
Going to be fun to watch and see what happens there with Texas A&M. And if they can, maybe that's the biggest if they can get over the Alabama hump, can they finish after that's all said and done? Just some of the ifs there from Bill Connelly. We'll come back. Hawks lose game 3. Trae Young questionable for game 4. If you're the Hawks, how do you feel about that? We'll break it down next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It's 3 and out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Hawks off tonight. Braves off tonight. Hawks game 4 tomorrow against the 76ers. Of course, Trae Young listed as questionable for tomorrow. So that's kind of the 50-50 hope with a bone bruise on his right foot that he suffered last night against the Milwaukee Bucks. So question, BJ, you and I were talking about, and I'll be interested to hear Ben's thoughts. You can also hit us up at Pigskin Radio, comment on the show. If you're the Hawks, do you look at Trae Young and say, hey, depending on how bad this bone bruise is, it may be questionable. Do you take 20, 30 minutes of Trae Young versus not playing him and say, I'm going to throw my eggs in on game 5 with at least a little more rested Trae Young? Or do you say it's game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals? If you can go 20 minutes, that's all we're going to get out of you, but we need you, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think if he can go, you need him in game 4. And I don't know. I don't know that anyone knows. I don't know that he even knows at this point kind of what that effort might be. I mean, Trae Young may get out there and, may be able to go close to something resembling regular minutes, or it may be an injury where the pain is so great or the mobility is so limited where he can't do much. If he can go, obviously if he can't go, he can't go. I mean, there are some injuries where you can't go, and it is what it is. If he can go, but he's going to be limited, and he can't do any more, damage to his body, obviously. I mean, you don't want to do anything risky medically, but if he can go and he's cleared to go, I think you need him for whatever he can give you. And in terms of the idea of, hey, maybe could you rest him and give him 48 more hours and maybe he could be closer to 100% on a Thursday? Clearly, this is not my area of expertise, so I'm saying this understanding that I'm speaking well beyond my pay grade and I may be wrong here, but I don't know / think that if he doesn't play on Tuesday that 48 hours is going to be the difference in him not being able to go versus being 100%. I mean, Ben, I know you said last segment or a couple of segments ago you've had a bone bruise before in your foot, I believe. I don't know that maybe not playing him on Tuesday and then saying, hey, man, take a day and a half or 48 hours, that all of a sudden you're going to be kind of immeasurably better. And even then you would be talking about at that point having to win 3 games in a row against a team who you've only beaten once in a situation where I would guess Trae would still not be 100%. So if he can go and if it's medically viable for him to go, I think you need him tomorrow in terms of whatever you can get. And you understand, hey, man, you're gutting it out. You're not 100%. You're just giving us what you have. You understand that. But I think if it's an option, you need him.
I'm going up to Trae. I'm saying, Trae, can you go? I mean, I'm talking to the trainers and I'm saying, Trae, can you go? I'm letting Trae decide. And I'm looking at Trae saying, Trae, we got 11 more games, man, potentially. 11 more this season. If this goes 7 and we go 7 next series, that's potentially how many more games we got left. I'm going to tell you why. Kawhi Leonard taught me something that I did not know you had the ability to do as a professional athlete, and that's the ability to say, no, I ain't going out there. I did not know you could do that. Them coaches get to looking at you, that pressure that comes with being a professional athlete. Only professional athletes will understand it, or maybe the spouses and children of these professional athletes. But I'm going up to Trae saying, Trae, you have earned the right to say no. Because this will happen. I don't want to Kevin Durant you. Last time we seen Kevin Durant with the Golden State Warriors, he was getting carted off because that's what he tore us. It ain't worth that. Now, the trainer's job and only job is to make you healthy enough to play. That's it. Not healthy enough to play. Because they got to deal with the coaches saying, can he go? Can he go? Yes, coach. This is the question they always ask, whether it's basketball, baseball, and we had a game right now. Could you go? And obviously, people are like, yeah, we had a game right now. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to see Trae Young not being able to walk off that court, man. I don't want that. Do I want Trae to play? Yes, that's a selfishness in me. That's a fan in me. But the player in me says, Trae, if you can't go, because BJ, we'll be able to instantly see it. Trae got the type of game, and Kevin, we got the type of game, though. If he's not himself, we go. Like, one thing we don't understand as onlookers is we become coaches because we could become really, really good at body language. That's what we watching with Trae. He doing all that limping. And if we honest, Trey needs every ounce of energy he has to make it out there. I mean, whatever he weigh, his 100 and whatever, he bringing it on every single play. So for me, I want him to play. But somewhere in the back of my mind, Trey gonna be doing it for the sake of, because this is the thing. If he does gut it out, can he play in game 5? If he does, because this is the thing. I used to take the little cortisone shots when I played. Cortisone just makes the pain go away. It's still there. You don't feel anything. I mean, you don't feel anything. It's so you can play. And now I'm probably feeling the effects of that, which is fine. I mean, I would still do it the same way, but I just think that don't let the magnitude make you lose your mind. I had a coach, don't let the magnitude make you lose your mind. Now, like, can you go? Because coaches want you to go out there. They ain't going, if I say, yeah, all right, he's going. But BJ, is like we say about the Hall of Fame. If we got to hesitate, it's probably no. I mean, can you go? That you see, because that your mindset is just go. As players, we just go. But I do want to see him play. But it's almost like, what's the worst thing for a pitcher? Rotate a cuff, right?
Your cuff.
Yeah, so that's the worst, right? Tommy John, that's the worst for a pitcher. For basketball players, it's lower extremities, it's foot, it's Achilles. Football players, it's torn ACL. So whatever's hurting on you, you got to overcompensate for that. So I just don't want him to mess up something else trying to compensate for that foot. I want Trey to go. God, I wish it wouldn't have happened to him. But that, maybe that's a good thing about me getting older. I'm trying to look out for these young. I want him to have a career far beyond this series. And the last thing I want to see is he can't walk up on his own, on his own ability. But Trey, make the best decision for you, and whatever he decides, let it be his decision.
No, you're right, and I mean, if you can't go, you can't go. If you can't go, you can't. It's hard. I mean, I don't think we know. I mean, do you guys think they already know in the locker room, or do you think they're kind of going to wait and see right up before tip tomorrow?
Yes and no. Yes, they do know, but it's Trey. The players' conversations amongst each other is always going to be different when you talking to the media, when you talking to the trainers. That conversation, because the players really know each other. They spend more time around each other. Yes, Nate McMillan, he knows Trey. Like, he knows him. Sometimes coaches know you better than you know yourself because all they do is watch you all the time. So they know your mannerisms, they know your behaviorisms, they know how you are. And for me, Kevin and BJ, I know when you said if he's 70% of himself, yeah, but is 70% of Trey Young gonna be enough to help the Hawks? That's all I'm saying. Like, Trey gonna score. You can't stop him from scoring. But is he getting back on transition like he could have? Is that breakaway really a breakaway now, or does he get run down for one? To get the block from behind. And forget the fact that they're going to punish him. Like if I'm all those guys that got fouls to give up, not named Tucker and Middleton and Giannis and Drew Holiday, let's go bang him. Why not? Y'all don't play anyway. Contribute something. So this is one of those tricky situations because Kawhi Leonard probably got us all looking at injury situations in the playoffs differently, because that's why he's not in San Antonio anymore. Because y'all say I can play. Well, I told Pop, no, go to Toronto and win it. So I don't know. I'm never the selfish one of me. Like I said, Trey going out there, man, you ain't been 100% since you came out the womb, and then he can't walk off the court. So let Trey decide. And this is another thing. If he does decide to go and decide I can't, once he gets out there, give him that decision too, because momentum for a game is real. But when that momentum wear off, you can't push out that foot. You out there walking like Trey old, not Trey Young. You don't want that either. It ain't worth that.
There you go. Hey, and again, I think it's just interesting to see. Hey, if you can only have Trey for 30 minutes, is that worth it to push forward, or do you try to let him rest as much as possible and say, I can give you 40 in game? Because again, look at the difference in the fourth quarter after that happened. He wasn't the same, and you wonder how much he can give you coming up in game number 4. Injury news just bad all the way around last couple of days in the city of Atlanta. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along 3 and out on this Monday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. No Hawks tonight. Game 4 tomorrow night. No Braves tonight. They'll be back at it tomorrow night as well. But you talk about the Trae Young injury news, and we are obviously disappointed in that. And also the disappointing news about Mike Soroka, BJ, and Ben. I was out this week at a ball field, and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, did you hear about Mike Soroka and his Achilles?" I was like, "Yeah, he's a rehab." Because people ask you that, knowing what we do. It's like, hey, I'm like, yeah, he's rehabbing. Hopefully he'll be back. And like, no, he tore it again. I was like, what do you mean again? And it was like his first day out of the walking boot, on his way to the Braves facility, walking in, he tore it again. And now you're talking about next July before they're talking about being able to pitch. Obviously, the Braves, I think, are not going back to the same doctor as they did the first time with Mike Soroka. But I mean, BJ, you talk about feeling for a guy. That is a guy that suffered a gruesome injury and a torn Achilles, got it repaired. Something wasn't right, kept trying to come back, and now you've torn it again. And again, I'm not an expert, but I do know when you deal with some of these things, like we saw with Johnny Venters, who had 3.5 Tommy Johns, and you say, why do you have 3.5? Because the doctors didn't want to do a full 4th Tommy John. At some point, that's a major tendon you're trying to repair. He may not be able to pitch. I mean, I think at this point, you say it would be next July. I think that would be fantastic if it happens at this point.
Yeah, you feel terrible for Mike. I mean, you hate that. I think when we all saw that news, we were, stunned and just felt immediately for him, like you feel for anybody who's going through a brutal injury. I don't know. In terms of how to know what to expect, how to project. I mean, the only thing I know to say at this point, Ben, is that's secondary. In terms of, I know a couple of weeks ago there were some rumblings, hey, could Mike be back by August? And now, you'll read some stuff on social media. Could Mike be back by opening day next year? I don't know. I mean, Kevin, you're saying July is what some folks are saying. I just have no idea. Not 1, but 2 Achilles tears. I know we've seen guys come back from multiple tears before, but that's a lot to overcome. And I think it's probably right to just not have a timetable at this point.
Yeah, I don't see the Braves having a timetable the second time around. Now, I understand that timelines kind of get you in trouble when you start talking about certain injuries, not all injuries. And I know that Mike Soroka was probably – did he tear his Achilles because he first day out the walking boot? Yeah, but it's like, what are they doing to try to overcompensate, because he does want to get back out there for the team. But you're no good to nobody when you talk about these trainers, and everybody's under a lot of pressure and scrutiny to get players like Mike Soroka back out there to be able to compete for National League East crowns. I get that part. But the body wants what the body wants, and it will 100% reject everything it does not want, regardless of how I feel, Mike feels, the trainers feel. But yeah, Kevin, I guarantee you, Snit will not be talking about the return of Mike Soroka anytime soon until Mike Soroka body's responds. Because I've never had an Achilles tear, but to those who I've known that had it, they say, Ben, it's one of those injuries where even after you get better with it, it's probably going to be something you're going to be doing rehab for, some type of pain, dealing with the pain with it, for a lifetime.
Yeah, and he just hated for that young man, and certainly the Braves with a potential ace, and now you really don't know when you're going to get him back into that rotation. Appreciate earlier in the show our chat with Chris Burnett, former Georgia offensive lineman. Really great conversation. Catch that on the podcast, ESPNCoastal.com.